Right, fellas, we're continuing with the circulatory system today. I will be organizing a live lesson tomorrow, and there'll be more details to follow on that. But our focus here for today and for the next 20 minutes is to look here at the different types of blood vessels, to look at the characteristics of those blood vessels, and to have an idea about how to measure or pulse rate so that we can try to see after our health. Okay. Just a few different questions that come up there, often on blood vessels, and you can read those in your own time. But I suppose the main one there really, the more we exercise, the more flushed we get, of course, which has to do with our blood vessels coming nearer the surface. So in the body, of course, the circulatory system at this stage, is made up of the heart, the different blood vessels, and the blood itself. We know that in the human body, blood will never leave the blood vessels themselves, unless maybe there has been some sort of wound where the blood has either left through the skin or has entered the actual muscle itself. The general rule of thumb, though, is that blood stays inside in the circulatory system. It doesn't move out. It just continually circulates around the body. In the body, we know that arteries are a type of blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Okay, so that would be the one thing there. And you can look at this letter here, A for away. Veins will be a type of blood vessel that carry blood into the heart, so they're carrying blood in. And finally, capillaries would be a type of blood vessel that will connect all of the other blood vessels together. So in other words, they connect up the arteries and the veins. In general, that would be the rule. There are a few exceptions. The coronary artery, which is one we'll be looking at if we're looking at a heart dissection. And the coronary artery is a blood vessel that takes blood into the heart because it's providing it with oxygen and nutrients that the heart needs. But the one thing I'd say, guys, is always remember arteries for away from the heart and veins for blood into the heart. Right. The two different types of blood colors, here we see in artery blood here on the left, and what we call venous blood on the right for the veins. The reason that there's a difference in color as the blood circulates around the body is because there's a difference in the amount of oxygen present in the blood. The blood is caused, as you know, by the color of the blood is caused by the presence of something called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a red pigment, and it becomes redder when oxygen binds to it, and it becomes something called oxyhemoglobin. So the reason that artery blood is so richly red, I suppose, is because you can be sure that the artery blood is full of oxygen because blood has just passed the lungs. Whereas the veins are bringing back blood from all around the body back into the heart to get back up to the lungs, and therefore it hasn't actually got a lot of oxygen and it's got an awful lot of carbon dioxide. So what we want to look at now is the difference between the three different blood vessels. The first thing is in relation to arteries. Arteries are, they are very thick blood vessels by comparison to the other two. They have a very thick muscle wall. They have this opening here where the blood flows through, and that opening is called the lumen. Compared to the other blood vessel, the lumen is actually quite small. So because they have a thick muscle wall and because they have a narrow lumen, the blood is actually being pushed through this artery under high pressure. And the high pressure is there because it needs to get the blood all around the body. There are no valves required. Valves are a type of structure that stop the blood from flowing backwards. And because it stops it from flowing backwards, it won't lead to anything like a heart attack or anything like that. It's really important that the blood will never flow backwards because the arteries are under so much pressure, though, blood is unable to go backwards. We know that the blood is generally very well oxygenated, and that's because a lot of the artery blood is coming out of this heart down to the rest of the body through something called the aorta. And this is the blood vessel that feeds the whole body with oxygen. So, as I mentioned here, no valves are required because it's under such high blood pressure. Right, so that is an artery. Let's have a look here at veins. Veins, unlike the arteries, have what we call a thin muscle wall. In fact, their lumen, which is the opening where the blood flows through, is actually much larger than the artery. Because they have such a large lumen and such a thin wall, the blood pressure is actually lower in a vein. We know that this lower pressure means that there's a possibility the blood could go backwards. So because there's a possibility the blood could go backwards, the veins need these valves, and the valves will stop the blood from going backwards. We know that the blood in general inside in the vein is what we call oxygen poor. It's oxygen poor because veins are coming in from all around the body, and they're carrying blood back toward the heart. And every time a vein passes a cell, all the carbon dioxide from those cells is coming into the vein, and the oxygen is going from the vein into the cell. So the veins are full of carbon dioxide, and they have very low oxygen. So that would be why they're oxygen poor. There's one function that you all need to know, and this is valves. Now, you have valves in your veins, but you've also got valves in your heart. And the rules, and what do veins do? Veins will prevent the backflow of blood. The last type of blood vessel that you need to learn about is, and this should be number 3, is a capillary. And a capillary is a blood vessel here that it's a very thin blood vessel. In fact, the wall is so small it is 1 cell thick. It's so narrow, the lumen is so narrow that this is where the blood flows through, that red blood cells actually have to squeeze through the capillaries. We know that the capillaries are under low pressure, but they have no valves required, because if you think about it, it's almost like a straw. And when you're, sucking water through a straw, sometimes water can get stuck on the side of the straw because it's so thin. And just like that, it's actually very unlikely that the blood is going to flow backwards in a capillary because it's so thin. We know the blood composition of the capillary will change. So at one stage when it's coming, so remember, the capillaries connect the arteries to the veins. So as the arteries can narrow into the capillaries then are involved in exchanging nutrients and oxygen with the surrounding cells. So oxygen and nutrients comes out of the capillaries and into the surrounding cells. And as this happens, the oxygen levels will decrease until suddenly they are back so low that they are now entering the veins. So most of the oxygen has been lost into the cells, and by the time they reach the veins, they have become quite oxygen poor. So you can think about this movement of substances as a process of diffusion. Remember, we covered diffusion before. It means that substances are moving from a high concentration to a low concentration. Why? Because, you've got what we call a concentration gradient. There's a difference in concentration on one side of the cell to the other, so naturally substances will move across. What substances will move across? Oxygen, glucose, vitamins, proteins, and other substances as well. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this, and in your small copy, you're going to copy in this table, and your job will be this. You are going to, underneath each of these blood vessels, write in yes or no. So say, for example, for arteries, are valves present or absent? So actually, this will depend. What you will write in here, instead of yes, you will say, are they present or absent? So arteries, are valves present or absent? Well, if you listen to the video lesson, you would know that they are absent. So you write in absent here. You skip on to veins and you write down are valves present or absent, so whatever your answer is, and you move on to capillaries and do the same. For arteries, you will write down is the blood pressure under high or low pressure? So for arteries, we know the blood is under high pressure, so we write in high. Okay, we do the same for veins and capillaries. We write down whether it's under high pressure or low pressure. I think you understand what you need to do now. You just need to work through all of these. Is it a thick or thin wall? Is it oxygenated or deoxygenated, or does it depend? Is it large or small when we're talking about the lumen, or is it microscopic? Okay, that is the end of today's lesson.